The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
This week's show will celebrate the historic referendum last Tuesday on our dictatorial governor, when Pennsylvania voters overwhelmingly passed two constitutional amendments which stripped the governor of his unilateral ability to impose martial lockdowns without the consent or participation of the legislature. We welcome to this week's show two special guests: Chairman of the House Republican Campaign Committee, Pennsylvania Representative Greg Rothman of the 87th Legislative District, and Attorney Guy Ciarrocchi, President of the Chester County Chamber of Commerce, and leader of the task force to push the yes vote on the two constitutional amendments to limit Governor Wolf's powers. Attorney Ciarrocchi hails from the Philadelphia area and stayed there for his education, receiving his Bachelor of Science degree at St. Joseph's University and his Juris Doctorate from the Villanova University School of Law. Among his career achievements, he was appointed Deputy Attorney General of Pennsylvania, counsel to the Senate Finance Committee, and served on the Tax Policy Task Force for former Governor Tom Ridge during the 1994 campaign. Our second guest, Representative Rothman, hails from the Cumberland Valley, earning a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Massachusetts, as well as a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University. Representative Rothman had a distinguished military career serving in the Marine Corps during Operation Desert Storm. His meritorious service led to the appointment by the President of the United States to the National Veterans Business Development Corporation. Representative Rothman was first elected to the House of Representatives in 2015 and was re-elected 3 times since. He sits in leadership as the Deputy Whip for the majority in the House, as well as heading up the aforementioned campaign committee. And we intend to have a lively discussion today as a post-mortem of what led to the surprising yes votes in Tuesday's election.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Guy and Greg, welcome to the Volpe Report. Thank you for making time. The show will air Sunday, but this is late Friday afternoon, so much appreciated. And the reason for both of your presence is that, as my viewers know, and we talked briefly off camera, I have been a very vocal critic of our governor for about, if it's 14 months since he assumed king-like dictatorial powers. I've been probably critical for 13 of those 14 months. I thought it was immoral. It was flat out, it was incompetent. And as an interlude to that, to remind our viewers, under sworn testimony before a United States federal judge, in the case that was, the judge determined that the governor had acted unconstitutionally by violating the due process equal protection clauses of the 14th Amendment, as well as the right of assembly of the First Amendment. In sworn testimony, and this was maybe the unkindest cut of all, Robinson, the Deputy Chief of Staff, under sworn testimony testified that the governor's policy teams, one economic and one for health, nobody knows who they are because the governor has refused to release to all the major newspapers who they were or minutes of those meetings. But nonetheless, that the governor was not present at the meetings when he was destroying people's lives, condemning people to death in nursing homes by the mishandling of the nursing home fiasco, shutting down Pennsylvania when 83% of the deaths in the Northeast were from nursing homes, put so many thousands of small businesses into bankruptcy while the big box stores could stay open. Disgraceful and then some. So, you know, and I'm going to turn it over to you guys now. You are two of the leaders, and I'll start with you, Guy. Well, the folks know from my introduction of you that you're the president of the Chamber of Commerce of Chester County, and that you were one of the leaders spearheading the yes vote to strip the governor finally of his authority, dictatorial powers that he's been asserting. So Talk to the audience up here in the Northeast how you got involved and what your mission was when you took this Herculean task, when you took this task to take it.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you for your leadership on this. I would share with your viewers that Chester County went into this lockdown 65 weeks ago, 439 days ago, not that we're counting. And we went into this with the strongest county economy in the state. Our unemployment rate was 2.9%. We were humming along. Our biggest challenge was that we couldn't grow fast enough. We were blessed. At the low point of the lockdowns, Chester County's unemployment rate exceeded 14%. It had grown by 5 times. We saw unemployment rates that we had not seen in recent recorded history. It impacted every segment of our society and every segment of our economy. It brought our economy to a standstill. And thousands more, like I know in northeastern Pennsylvania, that were blessed and able to keep their jobs, had to take pay cuts or worked less days, and all sorts of things were done by employers to try and keep businesses afloat. We got involved because when we first, like everyone else, we were all in this together. It was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We did what a chamber would do. We explained to our members and folks in the region what were safety practices, where to get sanitizer, where to get masks, how to keep yourself safe, how to keep your family safe. Then we worked on the aid programs. And by May of last year, over a year ago, we knew that other states were less closed down. We knew that other states were thinking about reopening, and we knew that Pennsylvania wasn't. And we knew this because the Secretary of Health was asked a direct question, and she said, we haven't thought about reopening yet. Remember the infamous red, yellow, green counties, and is your county moved? Well, Secretary Levine answered, I don't know what comes after green. We haven't discussed that yet. That was our first decision point. The second was last December. It took until December till the governor of Pennsylvania got on a phone call with the chamber executives from across the state, including those from Northeast PA. And the only firm commitment he made to 81 chamber executives in a 40-minute Zoom call, the only commitment he made to us in early December is, I see no reason why we will ever need to shut down again. The data doesn't support it. 4 days later was the infamous December shutdown in the middle of the holiday season, where schools were closed again and restaurants had to stop seating at any indoor capacity. So he only met with us once. He made one firm commitment and he violated. It was at that point that our chamber, having seen what happened and having been misled and our members misled, decided the only thing we could do, the only thing we're obligated to do, was to become active in this effort for Vote Yes. We did it for our members, we did it for our economy, and we did it for the state. Because as you said, small businesses were left out of this process from the beginning, and we had to speak up, and we're proud to have been part of the coalition that helped make Vote Yes a reality.
Very well stated. And Greg, before I turn to you, let me, an editorial comment, to underline with emphasis a couple of the points you made, Guy. I did a show here, again, late maybe in June, and we were coming up on the 4th of July weekend. And I had received information, unbelievably, that one of the largest manufacturers of American flags in the country, a Pennsylvania firm with hundreds of workers, completely shut down, could not get a waiver, that folks to put flags out for the 4th of July had to go to a box store like Walmart's, for example, to get American flags, and they were made in China. American flags made in China, when a major Pennsylvania employer with several hundred employees is shut down on the verge of bankruptcy, making American flags and made in America by American workers get shut down. That's one example. And then the other example that I just want again, we had, in fact, it was Senator Udechak, talked about in Lower Luzerne County 2 HVAC dealerships and service centers. They did exactly the same work. One gets a waiver. 7 miles away, doesn't get a waiver. That person gets put into bankruptcy, that organization. The other one puts a thing on his window because he got the waiver. approved by our governor as essential, underlined, to attract customers. That's the kind of stuff that went on. And there's your violation of the 14th Amendment, equal protection and due process. But to underscore your points, Guy.
That's the reason we got involved, because like most chambers, including in Northeastern PA, most chambers are made up of small businesses, and that's why we got involved. Look, again, we got involved because in March of last year, 66 weeks ago, we were all in this together. We banded together to 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We then learned of this waiver program and life-sustaining businesses, and I won't recount it all, but we remember all the stuff that didn't pass the straight face test, Chuck. We learned we weren't all in this together. We learned that you could buy a microwave at Walmart or Home Depot, but you couldn't buy it at your neighborhood appliance store. It didn't seem right. We were told you eventually were allowed indoors to get a beer, but you couldn't have a beer unless you bought a hot dog. You could recount it all, and I'm sure you have with your viewers. The governor's decisions were arbitrary, they were capricious, and he did nothing to make us all feel included, and that's why we got involved. It didn't pass the straight face test. He was leaving our small business out in the cold, and we had to step in and be their voice.
Well said. Representative Rothman, first of all, welcome back. You've been a guest on the Volpe Report, and I'm glad you can make time on a Friday afternoon. And no political campaign, especially one statewide, can happen without money. You're in leadership of the Republican Party in the House. They've trusted you with the chairmanship of the Republican House Campaign Committee. You raised money, and of course, it was a lot of your efforts and your colleagues' efforts, not only to put the question on the ballot, but importantly, to raise the money to educate voters about what was at stake for our Commonwealth. So first of all, again, congratulations for your leadership, and talk a little bit about your involvement in the process.
Yeah, and thank you, Chuck. Thanks for having me. And look, Guy Ciarrocchi and I have been friends a long time, and we could not have passed these two important constitutional amendments earlier this week without him. So thank you, Guy. We had from the beginning, from the morning after the governor started making, at his words, draconian cuts, we in the House Republican caucus and the Senate as well stood up to him. We introduced legislation. Talk about not including an co-equal branch of government in discussions. The legislature, we were prepared. We came in, we were ready to talk to the governor and work together to fight COVID and to take care of the people of Pennsylvania. And the governor ignored us. And he ignored us in every one of these decisions. It wasn't until we would introduce legislation, then he would sometimes, in the middle of the debate on the legislation, he would put out a statement that he was opening up, for instance, car sales or construction or real estate. And so, we thought the first referendum on him wasn't Tuesday, it was November. And the House Republicans, every single incumbent got reelected. We beat 4 Democrats, including the 30-plus year House Democratic Minority Leader. We beat him with a great representative from out in Pittsburgh. We just won 2 special elections on Tuesday, overwhelmingly. One was 76%, one was 65%. And Chuck, I was just looking at the numbers. We still have 9 seats in Pennsylvania that Donald Trump won in 2020 that are held by Democrats, including 3 in your neighborhood. So We're going to be in the Northeast. We're going to raise the money. The people of Pennsylvania have spoken, and they've told the governor that they've rejected the governor. As you said, it was a resounding defeat. And frankly, he deserves it because he has been acting like a king.
Right. You talked about a 30-year minority leader in the House of Representatives gets beat by a first-time a candidate for state office, for a state position. You got that one. Then you got Tim DeFore wins the Auditor General seat for the first time in a generation since Barbara Hafer back in the late 80s. That went Republican. But most shocking of all, I think, for me, is the fact that you have Joe Torsella, who was already talking about running for governor of Pennsylvania in the Democratic primary, was by all accounts a very successful treasurer from Philadelphia. And Stacey Garrity is from Bradford County. I think there's probably about 2,000 or 3,000 people, 7,000 deer, 600 cows. It's about as rural of the T of Pennsylvania as you get. An impossible win, and plus Philadelphia voted a record turnout by a couple 100,000 votes, record turnout. And Joe Torcello was the incumbent treasurer from Philadelphia, and she beat him. So, as I said, not in Pennsylvania it wasn't a blue tsunami, and I attributed that as a direct result, as a rebuke of our dictatorial, authoritarian governor, Tom Wolf. That was a way for people to say, enough.
And then, you know, Chuck, he comes out, we're in the middle of budget season now. He comes out after the election and proposes a 46% increase in personal income tax and small business tax, a 46% increase. I mean, he is as tone deaf an executive as this state's ever had. I mean, it's just as if he, I call him Governor Passive Aggressive, but he just doesn't seem to understand what the people of Pennsylvania are telling him. And you pointed out, we elected two watchdogs. The Auditor General and the Treasurer are watchdogs. And I think the voters of Pennsylvania know what they're doing. And they said, we're not going to allow a treasurer to keep issuing checks, which the Democratic treasurer did under Wolf. I mean, actually, the last couple Democratic treasurers went to jail. But, also with the Auditor General, we need someone who's actually keeping their eye on the way this governor is spending money. And, we're about to go into this budget. The governor continues to overspend. He spends beyond the budget, and he continues, to a $75 million no-bid contract for contract tracing. And then they released the data, and he just today announced finally they fired him. I mean, that should have been a fireable offense. First of all, they should have never put out a $75 million no-bid contract.
Of course not. Guy, back to you. You made reference to the historic unemployment in Chester County that you were confronted with directly. Well, we had historic unemployment all over Pennsylvania as well. I did another show in September, and I like your comment on this. Shockingly, that's 70,000 unemployed Pennsylvanians who qualified for unemployment compensation benefits. This was as of Labor Day, had not received their first unemployment check from the Department of Labor and Industry, in part because the governor had laid everybody off because of the pandemic. So our Auditor General, a fellow Democrat, Eugene D. Pasquale, referred to it as a Keystone Cops routine. That's pretty scathing coming from a fellow Democrat. But your thoughts on how mishandled the unemployment portion of the disaster was?
It was a moral crisis and a moral outrage. And as you know, Chuck, as we sit here today, the end of May of 2021, there are still reports of up to 10,000 people who are waiting for their checks from 2020.
Oh my God.
It's a failure of leadership. It's a moral failure. It is an absolute moral failure. It is borderline criminal. I mean, again, remember, almost everyone at home waiting for a check was at home waiting for a check because the governor forced their business to close. And in the early days, and some people are still waiting for those checks, it was illegal to go to work. Police officers were stopping you and asking you to prove why you were on the road. So we locked down businesses. We force people out of their jobs, and then we have the audacity not to pay them unemployment. And we used to do town halls with our elected legislators, some of Representative Rothman's colleagues, and that was a topic we brought up as early as May and June, saying, please fix this. And not to be facetious, Chuck, but you know enough about government, and certainly Representative Rothman does. If there's a problem of that scale, you fix it. You fix it. I was told the other day and saying, well, there are data problems and processing problems. Chuck, and your listeners, viewers probably know, there are 70,000 people that work in government. There are 10,000 people waiting for checks. Let's get some of the people working at the Parks Department, where our parks are closed down. Let's get some people working at some agencies that aren't operating. Let's get them over to the Department of Labor and Industry. I'm not being facetious. Every single person who doesn't have their check should be personally called by a live person, and we should figure a way to get them paid. I mean, to do this is an outrage. And again, it's part of the reason that we were compelled to join this fight for vote yes, so that the legislature could have a seat at the table, because folks like Representative Rothman were coming up with way after way after way to try and be involved. to try and hold the governor accountable. And because the Supreme Court protected him, they were left standing outside. Thank God we were successful on Tuesday, because now the legislators, the people's representatives, are now forced to be in the room whether the governor wants them or not, so we won't have crises like this happen again.
Yeah, well stated. Greg, back to you now. And that's a great segue from what Guy had said. My understanding is that 14 bills went to the governor, which in some way would have included legislative participation in the process and curtailed some of the horrible mistakes that led to death. And he vetoed all 14 of them. And he, as a lawyer, more shocking to me was that our Pennsylvania Supreme Court, in clear cases of law, statutory law, not only sided with the governor, but invented things that are not even legal in reading things into statutes that there were not there. In fact, I said flat out, and I can separate Justice Kevin Doherty, who voted with the noes in the dissent and wrote a great dissent against Wolf, even though he was a Democrat, but they still had a 4-3 vote majority. To me, they violated their oath. That concurrent statute that we did a special show on with an expert, with John Udicak, was clear. The concurrent resolution, both chambers could end the governor's authority after 90 days. And the Supreme Court said, well, yeah, but we don't read anything, so we're going to say that still has to go back to the governor for approval, which is ridiculous.
Ridiculous. I mean, imagine like you want to fire somebody who works for you, or you say, well, you're fired, and they say, well, yeah, but we want to approve that firing. Or if on that same logic, if you were going to impeach the governor, it would have to go to the governor for his approval. I mean, that was absurd. But look, it was not as if we didn't try, and that was. I told my Democratic colleagues, and there's some good ones, I told my Democratic colleagues, the last 14 governors in modern Pennsylvania times, 10 of them have been Republicans. There's going to be a Republican governor, and the Republican governor may declare an emergency disaster for the situation with our economy and say, I'm going to suspend all regulations, or I'm going to cut taxes unilaterally. I mean, we live in a participatory democracy in a republic where we have co-equal branches of government. The Supreme Court's not more important than the legislature, and we're not more important than the governor, but we're co-equal branches. So I think the Supreme Court was just as outrageous, and that's why I think it's important we make sure we elect Kevin Brobson in November as well and keep a Republican on the Supreme Court. But we're not done fighting. The governor's got another, I think, 19 months. Guy Ciarrocchi told me earlier. And we're going to make sure that we keep building our majority in the House and keep fighting for the people of Pennsylvania, which will help us to grow our majority.
No question about it. Guy, back to you. When you finally had a consult with the governor, and he said and promised there would be not another shutdown, then he 4 days later did shut down, and he has inflicted so much harm and damage, most of it irreversible, to Pennsylvania's small business community. Well, as if there's not one last indignity now, and I will preface this, I understand a lot of this money is also now Washington Democratic money that's coming in, but there's actually a disincentive for workers now to go back to work so they can keep collecting these unemployment checks, and that's killing small business now. Ones that did survive the pandemic now have to survive the Democratic free monopoly money giveaway that our grandchildren are going to pay for and great-grandchildren. We're up to almost $9 trillion. I'm telling my grandchildren, they better learn to speak Chinese because we're already a debtor nation to China, and it's going to be only worse. But take it from there.
Well, you're absolutely right, Chuck. I mean, in Pennsylvania, there have been two issues, sort of 1A and 1B, that's holding the economy back. And the first has been the governor's lockdowns and regulations, but 1B has been the worker shortage. And in either case, if the governor were to actually talk to legislators, if the governor were to actually talk to business people, and as we've talked about, one of the challenges throughout this whole 66-week period now has been his failure to engage and talk to people. We were told from day one when we were introduced to the governor that he was a small businessman and he ran a cabinet shop in New York and he understood what it was like to run a business. Well, I will tell you from our members, there's no evidence that he's ever run a business. There's no understanding of payroll, of inventory. And you're right. Our problem now is we can't get people back to work. And why can't we get them back to work? Well, first and foremost, we're paying some people 80, 90, or 100 or 110% of their pre-pandemic pay not to work. See, and some people are logical. If you pay me 110% of my pay not to work, I'm not going to work. Second is, some schools are still not in person 5 days a week. The Philadelphia School District, your viewers may already know, but they should know this. The largest school district in the Commonwealth in Pennsylvania, with 150,000 children, has not been in person since the first week of March of 2020. We're all going to pay that price. Their parents aren't back at work. So we've closed the schools. We've kept too many businesses closed, and now we're rewarding people staying at home. And just like he did with the lockdowns, the governor has failed to see what other states are doing. Many states are tackling this problem. They're removing the extra federal unemployment benefit, or they're requiring you to look for work, or they're doing other things. This governor, once again, because he doesn't talk to the legislature, because he doesn't talk to restaurant owners or barbershop owners or chamber executives, is missing in action. So Pennsylvania's unemployment, as we sit here today, Pennsylvania's unemployment rate is 2% higher than the national average.
Wow.
It's one of the highest in the nation, which means that probably more people than live. It's as if all of Wilkes-Barre and Scranton did not have a job today. That's how many extra people are out of work that don't need to be out of work because Pennsylvania hasn't addressed these problems head on. It's an outrage.
Thank you, Guy. And I'm sure, Greg, you see the same thing. You know, one of the things that a number of legislators, leadership legislators have discussed in the show, that they were never brought into the process, as you indicated. There was no collaboration. You know what else there wasn't? You had a bunch of, quote, policy team members from the governor's staff setting economic policy. If I'm governor, and I ran for that office, if I'm governor, I think we have some pretty good economists down at the Wharton School of Business in Philadelphia that would have been more than happy to answer the call to public service to come up and help a governor address the economic situation properly. And out at UPMC in Pittsburgh, some of the best teaching hospitals in the world. In fact, Dr. Starzl invented the double transplant that saved the life of a great governor, Robert P. Casey, when he did that double transplant. There's the University of Pennsylvania Medical Center in Philadelphia. With all this intelligence and expertise, didn't collaborate with anybody. That's the most offensive thing at all to me.
You know, Chuck, I went through the resumes of the people in the highest level of the administration working at the Department of Health and Health and Human Services. Most of them, almost nearly all of them, none of them had medical degrees. Most of them had degrees in public health administration. The only scientists in this administration were political scientists, and we saw that. Everything they did had a political bent to it. Everything they did had an ideological angle, and everything they did, the governor did to reward his supporters, including, I'm sorry to say, the teachers' unions, who have been the ones not coming back. It certainly wasn't the parents that didn't want the kids back in school. So Guy is right, and I'm looking forward to coming up to the Northeast and recruiting some candidates. So your viewers will see the House Republican Campaign Committee out there looking for candidates, because Vince Galco tells me there are at least 3 seats we could pick up in your neck of the woods. So we'll be up there.
Well, of course, Vince has also been on the show, a good friend of it, and it was through that friendship that I met you. So first of all, thank you again, Guy and Greg, for being on the show today. And I'm sure on Sunday it's a great show following what happened on Tuesday, to put as a kind of postmortem as to why what happened on Tuesday happened. And it couldn't have been stated better than by the both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for the opportunity.
Every week, Chuck Volpe shares his perspective on Pennsylvania issues in the news and on your mind. From new laws being introduced in Harrisburg and Washington to government spending and even local controversies, hear how they affect us in Northeast and Central Pennsylvania. Catch Volpe's Views every Tuesday on the Fox 56 News, first at 10.